Story 1. About a man who was supposed to make a movie but instead embezzled the funds to pay himself. Story 2. The story of all human beings who have ever lived. It would be a several millennia-long movie, though. The production would employ every single human willing to work, thereby ending unemployment and poverty worldwide. Story 3. A very long movie that replaces the last 3 seasons of Game of Thrones. I would use all the same actors but increase the budget for all effects and ask George R. Martin to complete writing all the source material so that everything is high quality. Story 4. District 10. I almost do not want them to touch it because the first is pure cinema, but I am willing to take a chance with an unlimited budget. Special effects still hold up or look better than today's movies. Story 5. A live-action BioShock. There was one in the works by a Russian director. After Watchmen came out and performed poorly in theaters, the budget for the BioShock project was cut severely, although the director is still holding on to the script. Story 6. Against a Dark Background by Ian Banks. Starring Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt, Dave Bautista, David Tennant, Catherine Zeta-Jones, with enormous computer-generated imagery, Gary Oldman as the antagonist, and a stunning 3-part series. Easy. Story 7. Independence Day but with real extraterrestrials. I am sure there is some amount of money that would make them want to participate. Story 8. Battletech. From the rise of the Star League to the attack of the clans, covers several wars within the span of approximately 500 years. Story 9. I don't know what it would be beyond Robert Carlyle as Rumpelstiltskin causing chaos and spitting clever quips. That's all I have. Story 10. An epic medieval fantasy worthy to sit beside the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The actors are real, wearing quality, practical armor with realistic weapons. The production features the best practical and computer-generated effects, with on-location filming for as many scenes as possible. Everyone is paid well, from the lead actors to the boom microphone operators and others. Story 11. A 5-hour-long version of Red Dead Redemption starring Chris Hemsworth as Arthur, Matthew McConaughey as Dutch, Michael Pitt as Micah, and Norman Reedus as John. Story 12. Ringworld is a book that could be an amazing movie, but the budget would have to be huge to do it justice. Story 13. Pern. Gotta make the dragons look right. The locations will be difficult to scout. Unfortunately, you don't get to the twist of the whole story until late in the series, so it will take more than one movie. The hard part is deciding which trilogy to start with. Story 14. Greyhound was a fantastic movie with good special effects. I want to make The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors, a war epic about the wholly lopsided battle between the Japanese Center Force and Task Unit April 3, 77. Rear Admiral Clifton A.F. Sprague has to defend 5 escort carriers with 3 destroyers and 5 destroyer escorts against Admiral Takeo Kurita with 4 battleships, including Yamato, 4 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 10 destroyers. Task Unit April 3, 77 displaced about 72,000 to 73,000 tons of water. Yamato displaced about 71,500 tons by herself. The disparity of tonnage is enormous. The total Japanese force weighed around 250,000 tons. It is an amazing and horrifying story, one that should be told on a grander stage than it has been. Story 15. I would hire everyone involved in any way with making the Marvel and DC movies and lock them away so the world does not see another one of those pieces of garbage ever again. Story 16. A movie about me making a movie starring me. I would use the budget for marketing and to distribute it to every theater and streaming service so everyone watches it. Story 17. The Dune film that was meant to feature Salvador Dali included one of his stipulations in his writer: a throne made of entwined dolphins. Story 18. A movie following the plot of an actual Dungeons & Dragons campaign. The campaign would be recorded in a podcast style, then adapted into a movie or possibly a television show. Story 19. Not that it would need it, but an updated Spider-Man movie. I have been waiting for this forever. I would use that infinite budget wish on this. Story 20. Selfish me wants to film a documentary about traveling the world, eating in fancy restaurants, and staying in luxurious hotels. Philanthropic me wants to film a documentary about feeding hungry children, sheltering the homeless, and caring for the elderly in my local community. Story 21. I would use the unlimited budget on research to determine the exact, perfect way to educate and convince 100% of the global population about the dangers posed by climate change and human tribalism, as well as provide the solutions to those issues. All produced in a concise 88 minutes, displayed for free across the planet in IMAX. The remainder of the film's budget would go towards implementing those solutions. Story 22. I do not know what it would be about, but it would be in that semi-realistic animation style they use for video game cutscenes. Story 23. A documentary where I receive an Ivy League education for free because part of the movie's budget covers my tuition. Story 24. Produce, not direct. That means I will need to have a competent director for it. In that case, I am going with a proper sequel to Pacific Rim and investing money in Guillermo del Toro until he perfects it. The Pacific Rim 2 we got is one of the biggest wastes of a sequel opportunity. Story 25. Create a 3D animation based on Pat Mills and Simon Bisley's comic Slain, the Horned God, or the Metabarons comic series by Alejandro Jodorowsky and Juan Jimenez. Story 26. A documentary called What Really Happened. The Shame of a Nation details how most of our funds were spent developing technology, training, and embedding agents into the Trump administration. These agents planted recording and listening devices in key areas. Then we waited, collecting information for the next 4 years. When it was all over, we collected and edited the material, moved all participants to a safe foreign nation, and released it along with raw footage for everyone to hopefully see the truth. Story 27. It would be the last 3 books in the Expanse series. It would easily be 10 hours long, and the budget would be set at $2 billion as a start before marketing. Awesome. I need to see Laconia in all its strange glory. Story 28. Remake of Moulin Rouge with the current Broadway music setting. Remake of Star Wars original trilogy with J.J. Abrams' take. Story 29. The Battle of Jutland. Although the sinking of the Britannic was also significant, there were many acts of heroism in saving those people. Jutland is interesting because Britain had all the advantages and squandered many of them. Story 30. A comic-style dystopian science fiction based on the concept album Deltron 3030. Most of the funds would go toward convincing Del the Funky Homo Sapien to allow licensing. Story 31. Live-action anime. Shonen, because what I really want is live-action action. There is plenty to choose from. Dragon Ball Z, My Hero Academia, and 100 other shows. It would be hard, even if you don't consider the technical aspects. Those types of shows have wild ranges in tone, and I want them all. I want the swelling music and the internal monologue as the hero, after giving it all, reaches deep down and, with the power of friendship, is able to overcome any odds. Then 10 minutes later, there is some slapstick. People give the Marvel Cinematic Universe a hard time for that, and they don't even come close to the big swings you find in anime. More than anything, I want the people making the movie to push their craft to the limit, which I think you would have to do to really pull it off. Like, how do you even pull off casting and showing all might? He's 7 feet 2 inches tall and 600 pounds. And I don't want a big guy. I want 7 feet 2 inches. I want him to look and feel as huge as he is when everybody around him is probably going to be under 6 feet. And that's just one character. But it would be very cool. Story 32. Adaptation of Christopher Claremont's X-Men, as faithful as possible, Sin City style. Replicate camera angles. Use saturated comic book colors. Every piece of dialogue exactly copied. And a runtime of about 2,000 hours. Story 33. Bubarella and the Bagman. That is all you need to know, the title. You are going to buy a ticket for that movie. Everyone is. Who does not want to see a movie called Bubarella and the Bagman? Story 34. I just finished reading Lies My Teacher Told Me and was thinking there needs to be a good film about the genocide of indigenous people in the Americas. Maybe focus on Christopher Columbus' heinous behavior in what is now Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Hire Paul Thomas Anderson as the director. Maybe Daniel Day-Lewis as Columbus to bring those two talents together again. I wanted to be unflinchingly honest about how cruel the colonization of this continent was. Story 35, Resident Evil. I would make it what it was supposed to be, not what the director and his wife did to it. Story 36. With unlimited funds, I would make a movie about my life since getting married. It would follow the whirlwind of our wedding, the honeymoon, a near-fatal motorcycle accident, and the spontaneous pandemic-era United States road trip we took trying to find a new place to live after selling our house during the wild price spikes of 2020. The finale? Us buying our next home site unseen via FaceTime with a realtor. The moment he panned into the garage and I saw a urinal installed, I knew this was the one. Every garage should have a urinal. Story 37. A true-to-the-books adaptation of the Codex Alera series by Jim Butcher. It would be at least 18 hours long, but I would cut it into 6 parts, one for each book. It is technically one movie, but it is practically 6. Story 38. My historical epic about a Norman who travels to Sicily, then to Constantinople and goes on to fight in the First Crusade. Or my sex farce comedy about a woman who farts and food comes out of her butt. Story 39. Justice League meets 12 Angry Men. The alter egos of the heroes are called for jury duty in a death penalty case. Clark reconciles the reality of the American judicial system and faces a situation where using his superpowers is useless. Bruce struggles with his vow not to kill. Barry takes on the responsibility to sit and pay attention. It becomes a compelling discussion of ethics and the imperfections of the legal system. Story 40. So many people are opting for, yeah, I do it but with a series. You get to make a movie. If I am making a single movie, I am going with the human campaign from Warcraft 3, which should have been where the movie started. Even if another movie gets made afterwards, that is what so many of us wanted to see. Story 41. A remake of Underworld that 1. Makes the werewolves less awkward when they move, changes how some characters dress, uses extra time to explore the political background, includes other minor changes such as cooler use of weapons. Essentially, it fixes minor issues to make an already good movie better. Story 42. I am making a short film about all the different ways I can spend the money. It will be the most expensive film ever produced, will only be released after my death, and will consist of the only footage I ever shot. 30 seconds of me accidentally shooting a video when I thought I was taking photos. Story 43. I would create a 25-hour animated film of the Stormlight Archive novels once they are finished. Then, I would cut it down to 10 shorter films, each 2.5 hours or less. Story 44. Warhammer 40,000. Build actual titans and giant greater demons with the biggest human bodybuilders wearing full Space Marine armor. There is no plot. It is a 3-hour non-stop fight fest with every perceivable fighting style included to make it a feast for the eyes but as shallow as a puddle. Story 45. The Child Cycle, or for non-fiction the Feynman Lectures on Physics, or Isaac Asimov's Guide to the Bible. Story 46. A lot of good ones have already been said, so I will go with something I thought about the other day. A series of the Great Mouse Detective movies, all based on different Sherlock Holmes stories. I miss the days of Disney creating animated anthropomorphic animal movies and shows. Story 47. It is a character piece about how a man lives his life with every waking hour documented until he dies. Of course, the production value is the real issue. They need to provide the star with a house, a car, entertainment, travel expenses, 3 meals a day, a gym membership, healthcare, and so on until the production ends upon his death. Story 48. The entirety of the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. Made in the way Peter Jackson did the Lord of the Rings films, each of the 10 main books would be at least a 2.5 to 3.5 hour long movie at minimum. There would be no parts 1 or 2. They are all full length. Story 49. God Emperor of Dune. The first novel has now been completed, and I know Denis Villeneuve is working on Dune Messiah. However, he has no plans to go any further than that. I would skip ahead and use my unlimited budget to create a second Dune trilogy based on Children of Dune and God Emperor of Dune. Children of Dune, as a novel, basically sets up God Emperor of Dune. Therefore, it would make sense to adapt both novels together and give them the trilogy treatment. I am not sure who could direct it. But with an infinite budget, I would aim for someone like Denis Villeneuve, Darren Aronofsky, or Tarsum Singh. Story 50, Milton's Paradise Lost. Lucifer's story. The better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven character. Some studio wanted to make it a few years ago but had to give up because too many winged angels made the computer-generated imagery cost too high. The story is glorious and wicked. Story 51. Create a series based on Stephen King's The Dark Tower and make it as epic as Game of Thrones. The movie was actually poor. Story 52. A movie about Robert Smalls. He was a slave in Beaufort, South Carolina. During the American Civil War, Smalls commandeered a Confederate transport ship and sailed it from the Confederate-controlled waters of Charleston Harbor to the United States blockade that surrounded it. He then piloted the ship to the Union-controlled enclave in the Beaufort Port Royal Hilton Head area, where it became a Union warship. In the process, he freed himself, his crew, and their families. His example and persuasion helped convince President Abraham Lincoln to accept African-American soldiers into the Union Army. Story 53. It is called Exploding Helicopters. It opens with a helicopter shot of a beach as the title credits roll. The helicopter moves over the beach, then collides with the ample cleavage of a woman in a bikini, revealing that the helicopter is a toy. After that, it is a buddy cop movie or some forgettable script. The main point is that every time a helicopter appears on screen, even if it is a news helicopter far in the background, it explodes. The protagonists decide to take a helicopter to get somewhere quickly. There are 4 helicopters on pads, and as they approach each one, it explodes in a huge fireball. One of them says, "So we call a cab?" Background scenes show news reports about the dangers of helicopters and a possible ban on helicopters. Homeless people push shopping carts filled with helicopter parts to scrap yards. In the end, the bad guy is killed in an exploding helicopter. Real helicopters are used for the explosions. Story 54. My mother has always said the story of my first love would make a good movie, so I guess with unlimited money, I could do it right. Story 55. Ghost in the Shell closely follows the manga and uses a significant amount of practical effects. The protagonist would be computer-generated imagery similar to Battle Angel Alita, but I would invest heavily to get it right. Story 56. Either a 3-movie series about Warhammer 40,000, or a horror movie about realistic space exploration where one of the crew members develops space madness or some kind of delirium and starts murdering people in creative ways after they land on a new planet that is infested. Story 57. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children adaptation that would not have completely and utterly disappointed me. That movie is my Roman Empire every single day, I imagine, if it was even slightly accurate to the books. What I could have had. Fudge. Story 58. The history of America is important. It would be a waste to dismiss it because some people claim those individuals died 200 years ago to make former President Donald Trump look bad. I hope their families are not part of this misunderstanding. Story 59. Every book in the Discworld series has been adapted into multiple movies, some featuring full CGI. Everyone works standard hours, typically 9 to 5, Monday through Thursday, with no crunch time to ensure quality and fair wages. Even actors work these hours, are paid for 6 days, but receive 3 days off. Story 60. I would not make a movie, but a pure chaotic Discworld series. Individual stories that collide and mix at appropriate times. Be as true as possible to the books. Story 61. Just a single movie? It is going to be like 15 to 20 hours long. The Lioness and the Immortals book series by Tamora Pierce. 2-dimensional animated. Story 62. It would not really matter. I would just use it to do the other things I want to do, like building infrastructure. Story 63. Why does everyone in this thread have so much trouble with basic reading? The reason this question is interesting is that you have all the money in the world to make one movie. People here are making television shows, movie series, and videos that are functionally never-ending. None of those are movies. With an infinite budget, I would make a huge period piece action drama. I kind of want it to be about pirates, maybe about a naval heist back when Seville was a major port for the transport of gold. Only real sets and practical effects and a great score. Story 64. It would be a zombie film where the apocalypse is started by mutated insects that fly into people's orifices and lay eggs. Story 65. 10-second art house piece. Open shot on a Satsuma against an all-white background. No sound. Roll credits. I have undertaken all roles at an exceptionally high rate of pay. Story 66. A real-time movie about a man and his family living large without any money restriction, enjoying luxury, traveling, and having an amazing time. It stars me, my wife, any children we may have, and their children as well. The approximate running time would be 200 years. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.